Good evening. Very happy New Year and welcome to this program. We have Dr. Jagdish Sheth today. Actually, he told me that you don't introduce me. I said I have to do my formality. Everybody knows him here. I mean, there is no actual formal introduction is needed, but still I will take 2 minutes and he has agreed for that. He is a very well-known, renowned professor in the field of marketing, has done a lot of research, came out with a lot of books, and if we go in the details of the research papers and the books, it will take the whole session. But he is from Goizueta Business School, Emory University, Atlanta, and has experience of more than 50 years. And many of us are less than 50 years, so I think that is something good. He has taught in various universities and University of Southern California, University of Illinois, Columbia University, MIT, Emory University, and the list goes on. He is also founder chairman of Academy of India Marketing. He's also served on the board of very well-known companies, and few of them include Nostan, Cryocell International, and not to forget Wipro Limited. He has been awarded many awards all across, and which includes Outstanding Marketing Educator Award by the Academy of Marketing Science and the Outstanding Educator Award twice presented by Sales and Marketing Executives International. Very interestingly, he has been given all 4 top awards in American Marketing Association. They are Richard D. Irwin Distinguished Marketing Educator Award, the Charles Parlin Award, the P.D. Converse Award, and Outstanding Contribution to Theory in Marketing, and the William Wiki Award of Marketing for the Better Society. So, great achievements. He has come out with many books, and interestingly, he is also involved in a lot of philanthropist activity, and he supports a lot of organizations, including, he is with us at AMA. Not to forget that he has come out with a lot of books. He is going to launch a new book today. So I'll request Ratnendra Bhai to talk something about the book. But before that, on behalf of all of us here and AMA, I would like to welcome Professor Sheth with the bouquet of flower. Yatindra Bhai, please.
Good evening, friends, and very warm welcome to all of you with our very special guest today this evening, Dr. Jagdish Sheth. It is my privilege and pleasure to talk about Professor Jagdish Sheth because as a management student of marketing at Jamnalal Bajaj University somewhere in 1980, we were studying a book of Philip Kotler. And in that, there was one very typical assessment of product behavior and product life cycle, and that was known as Howard Jagdish Sheth model, marketing model. So since then, as a student, I was introduced. Also, I had a privilege to invite him at AMA in year 2000, which graciously Dr. Sheth agreed and came and gave a wonderful speech on a very typical market dynamics in terms of leadership fight of the companies, rule of 3. And as per him, there are only 3 companies which matter into any marketplace. First, second, and the third one will either upset or go out and someone else will come. But the point is that the kind of research what he has done It is seminal, brilliant, and I should say penetrating, and which gives huge amount of insights. And today, he has come up with another gift to people like us, which is a very unique contribution by him. And this is the Handbook of Advances in Marketing in an Era of Disruptions. We all know that we are living in a VUCA world. I mean, the new acronym which has come, VUCA. And I'm not going to talk about what is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, what. But he has created a handbook of advances in marketing in an era of disruptions. And the outstanding feature of the book is that many eminent writers have contributed to this book under leadership of Dr. Sheth. It's a unique achievement. So point is that we are in the era of massive disruptions in the markets, media, management, approaches, and business models. These disruptions are being caused by rapid technological changes on one hand and tectonic shifts in consumer behavior and social behavior. The kind of new era of digital world what we are getting into. In 1989, it was written by Bill Gates in his book that two major events happened. Berlin Wall came down and windows went up. And it's a really remarkable development. The way in which the advent of internet, the kind of communication which is a human quality. As a human being, we all need to communicate. And this is the art of communication what we have developed 10,000 years ago as Homo sapiens has created new ways of doing things and new ways of living. So the point is that it started replacing a lot of industries very steadily. Likewise, after the internet coming in and everything getting settled in our sync of mind, we could see that bookstores slowly they were becoming non-relevant, and somebody else will came up with book business with the help of internet in a much different delivery systems. So the point is that marketing knowledge and practices have to advance at a significantly higher pace to address the changing context of market behavior. And here, this handbook of advances in marketing in an era of disruptions is meant to share ideas and new knowledge that are relevant to this world of disruptions. Leading scholars from around the world who have keenly observed the changing market environment, business policies, parameters, practices, theories, and methods, have put forth their thesis on how marketing thinking needs to evolve to keep pace with the market reality. And this is a very dynamic thing. While we are looking at marketing and the kind of competition what we are into, being in India doesn't mean that you are totally insulated with Indian market economy. Now you are impacted by people world over, and this impact can happen in seconds. It is not that it takes time. A new launch which is happening in any part of the world, it is shared, it is absorbed, it is known by millions of people at a time. So, this book is dedicated to Professor Jagdish Sheth and honors his sustained contribution as a management thinker, scholar, academician, and corporate advisor in illustrious careers spanning for more than 5 decades. And we just spoke to Jagdish Bhai a couple of minutes ago that he is already 80 years young. That is really remarkable. So friends, with that and with thumping applause, may I welcome Dr. Sheth to talk on the subject what he has chosen today. Dr. Sheth, for you. Thank you. Anyway, something more about book. The book is available outside, so if anybody is interested, they can pick up the book. And we will do the formal ceremony of releasing this book on this forum.
By the way, the book is actually edited by my colleagues, Atul Parvatyar and Raj Sisodia, and Atul is even present here. So, he is the one who has created the book. I am the focal of writing in many ways. So, come on over, Atul, please.
Please.
You can just. That's his book, really.
This book is in his honor.
It's incredible amount of love, affection, effort that has gone in, and so.
Good evening, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I thought before you're going to listen to Professor Sheth, because once Professor Sheth speaks, it's probably best idea for me to just sit down and applause. Otherwise, if you've heard him before, you know how enthralling he is in his, overview of things. But let me give 1 second about this book. This book is dedicated to Dr. Jagdish Sheth, who is first and foremost my mentor. He said to somebody else that his mentor, who's Professor John Howard, made a lot of difference to him, but to me, I'm nobody without Dr. Jagdish Sheth. So for the last 25, 30 years almost, I've had the great privilege to learn under the master, as they say. Basically, he would often say that if you take a loaf of, a handful of grain, you can make it into a loaf of bread, or you can take a rough diamond, you can polish it and make it worthwhile. But when you take a human being and you actually polish the human being, the potential is enormous. And that is Dr. Jagdish Sheth. He has shaped not only myself, but countless other people. And to the extent that he has shaped so many people's lives, the leading scholars in the world, is demonstrated the fact that when we approach some of the best known scholars, the foreword is by Philip Kotler, you refer to Philip Kotler, or any of any of you who have known about all the top marketing scholars in the world, all of them, when we approach them regarding this book, everybody very willingly contributed both the essays and a tribute to him. So it speaks volumes about Dr. Jagdish Sheth, how he has touched lives of many, many people. He's shaped the thinking of scholars. He has shaped the thinking as well as lives of many people. He has mentored countless number of people. And this book looks into the very contemporary issues that we are facing today. Today we are seeing massive amount of disruptions because of technology or due to shifts in consumer behavior, whether it is also issues regarding the larger aspect of making this world a better world. So you will see that there are several articles on making this world a better world, whether it be on sustainability, whether it reflects to kinds of harmful goods that we need to avoid or are mindful consumption related. It also looks into all the new technologies, how it's impacting our world, particularly in the sphere of marketing, and the new thinking that is required. So the essays are very easy to read, although the book is very academically driven, written by academicians, but you'll find the essays very easy to read, whether you are an academic audience or you're a managerial audience. And you will see that the love for Dr. Jagdish Sheth is also in the last section of the book. Individual scholars insisted that they write a tribute to Dr. Sheth. So several of them, there are in all 70 scholars from around the world who have contributed to this book. And several of them have not only written an essay, but they have also written a special tribute to Dr. Sheth, given his years of his dedicated life in terms of the academic community, as well as his philanthropic and a very benevolent giver to people. So it is a great honor for me to have been able to put together, along with my colleague Raj Sisodia, who has also been a great benefiter of Dr. Sheth's mentoring. Both of us, in our own individual capacities, have had the opportunity to write with Dr. Sheth, learn from him, and then be able to contribute back there. So once again, this is a great dedication to him, and I would not like to miss the opportunity to say it's not only to him, it's also to Mrs. Sheth, Mrs. Mother Sheth, who along with Professor Sheth has always been there for most of us. He's like, we are like part of the family. We are treated almost as a member of the family. So they always say, behind a great person, there's always a great woman. So that's Mrs. Sheth. So thanks to both of them. And of course, I would also like to take one second to also acknowledge the assistance given by Mr. Jain Shah, who is the Executive Director of Academy of Indian Marketing. Behind the scene, he does a lot of work, and he also is able to manage a lot of other events and activities, including many academic and non-academic activities. And this event, to a large extent, he's also part of this. So thank you once again, and once again would like to say this is a perfect opportunity for me in front of you to be able to dedicate this book to Professor Jagdish Sheth. Thank you.
Straight away we'll invite Dr. Jagdish Sheth.
Thank you. Well, good evening. As Mr. Sharma mentioned, I just turned 80. Do I look 80? No. That's because I'm in marketing. If I was in operations or finance, it'll be a different world, right? So marketing is always enthusiastic about the future, passionate. Salespeople take all the abuse and still get up and do things next day, right? Pretty much. So, but people have asked me, how come you look so young and all that stuff, and what's the secret of the life and all that stuff? And I say there are three things. First one, of course, is that be optimistic about the future. Future is brighter than the past, clearly. Second one is to really have a very nurturing family. My wife, we have been married 56 years now, and has supported me, and we are looking forward to celebrating the 60th birthday. Remember, future is optimistic, bright, etc. And the third thing is choose the right mother, okay? Did you get it? It's the genes, primarily. So it's all about the genes. I also want to thank two people before I get into the presentation. My colleague Atul Parvatiyar and my other colleague who cannot be here, Raj Sisodia, who, as you know, has started a whole movement called conscious capitalism worldwide, educating business leaders that it is not enough anymore just to make money, but you should also make sure that the society benefits while you are making money. So it's a purpose-driven, very, very major transformation is taking place. Unfortunately, he's traveling and could not be here today. I also want to acknowledge Jain Shah, who is a chartered accountant, lives in Bangalore. Not only is the executive director of the Academy of Indian Marketing, and we just finished 4 days at MICA before coming here, but also he has been a very strong personal advisor and a supporter to me. Things in India, He knows more about all the issues, compliance, regulation, as well as news and information. So people go to Google to search for information. I go to Jayant Shah. Okay? I mean, it's that important in my life. So again, two key supporters in my life, my wife on the one hand, Jayant on the other hand, and great colleagues. And that's what makes the world go better for me. Here are the reasons why I'm very optimistic about the future of India. If we think that from 1991 economic reforms, or what's known as the second independence of India, was very profound and change, we have not seen anything yet. The journey is going to continue in a much stronger way, and the reasons are probably three main reasons. First of all, by sheer accident or however, we got the access to mobile technology. I was the advisor on the rolling out or commercialization of the cellular telephone industry in America. In 1983-84, we had brought the largest amount of very good consultants, and the forecast was that worldwide the demand, even in the year 2000, will be only about 954,000 cellular mobile subscribers. Of course, they were wrong, because they never thought that countries like China and India can even afford mobile phones. But the rest is history. The biggest market for mobile phones is China number 1, India number 2. This has transformed the society. And now you add the 4G rollout by Reliance Jio on a national level, which means the broadband capability, especially for video communication like YouTube, can be accessible anywhere. And we are the largest growing market for smartphones right now. China is ahead in terms of saturation point, but we are catching up from feature phones to smartphones. And as that happens, there aren't going to be less and less differences between the urban and the rural markets, between the educated and not so educated people. It is actually true democratization of technology in front of our eyes. Supported by the government at the same time, the Digital India initiative on the one hand, the Aadhaar platform, which will go through legislative reforms, will be another major achievement. There is nobody in the world, including United States, who has been able to have a biometric identification of more than 1 billion people. That's impossible. And that database has not been hacked in, at least publicly that we know, which is cybersecurity, which again is mind-boggling capability. And today, we are the envy of the world. Usually, advanced countries will lead in terms of technology breakthroughs, and we will be adopting or localizing it. Today, it's reverse innovation. China is more a nation of innovation rather than imitation, and in the software area especially, we are leading the world. So these are the changes on the one hand. The other major change actually has to do with the rest of the world discovering India. India will become the second sourcing destination out of nowhere, given the alignment or lack of alignment between China and America, or the rest of the world for that matter, who depends so much on China. And China, with a stroke of a pen and policy, can basically shut down the supply. If you don't have supply of ordinary products at home, you have a revolt by people. And that can topple the governments. It's that strategic. So all countries are saying that we have to have a second sourcing destination. Several countries are now chosen as a second source, like Vietnam on the one hand, Morocco on the other hand, for example. But India seems to be one of the largest because we have huge resources here possible. And of course, Made in India strategy that they are implementing, I find fascinating. Made in India will be very successful, much more so in the professional services market, because we have the largest human capital pool possible. So if you want to find gold, where do you go? Wherever there is a gold mine. So if you look at the city of Hyderabad, you now have Ernst & Young 50,000 employees in one location alone doing accounting services and advisory services all over the world. Oracle is now building a corporate campus there as big as an Infosys or let's say a Wipro. 1.2 million square foot of facility that will be open very soon. This is true of Microsoft, Google, all the Silicon Valley companies are coming here because immigration policies says that you cannot come to America, for example, but it is not limited just to the American corporations, but true of the Japanese corporations, Korean corporations, German corporations, etc., etc. So the world is now going to make a difference in the rise of India. So it's not only us what we will do, but the rest of the world would like to have a counterbalancing force to China, which I'll get into. But the biggest change around here is in the family. With technology, with modernization, the generation gap today, my estimate is only 8 years. The younger sister cannot relate to the older sister if they are only 8 years apart. They are moving that change that fast, both in lifestyle, external appearances, as well as values, family values. And this is a major discontinuity. For generations, we learned quite a lot from parents. This new modern generation, often I have labeled as a call center couple. Even though they live at home during college, the boy meets the girl at college. They fall in love. They would like to start their own family, but do not want to live with parents. They would like to start their own separate, independent living, very similar to what has happened in the Western world or what is happening in China, but here it's happening much sooner than we all recognized. There's a discontinuity here, clearly. And they are all first-time buyers. First-time buyers of cell phones, first-time buyers of, in fact, home appliances, first-time buyers of television, and hence you see the Korean companies like LG on the one hand, Samsung on the other hand, Electrolux if they are here, Whirlpool, they're all doing exceedingly well in terms of the growth of products. These are all first-time buyers, which is a large market, and eventually we think first-time buyers will end up buying more homes rather than rent homes. Big change. There are many contradictions almost from our previous stereotype about Indian market. If you take a software engineer, just fresh graduate, and employed by TCS, HCL, Infosys, Wipro, the starting salary would be about 60,000 rupees a month. 7 lakhs to 8 lakhs, somewhere in that range. This young person, and I'll use he as a common denomination, actually has no cash flow. While income is high, discretionary income is very low. He has to pay in Bangalore as a city, or in Delhi, Bombay is even more outrageous, maybe about 25 to 30,000 rupees just as a paying guest. So 1/3 of his basic pay goes away. He has to pay TDS, whatever, 30%, 25% they withhold, that goes away. Of course, he's more modern, therefore he has a boyfriend, girlfriend, and you have a girlfriend, you have to go out in the evening. And of course, they are more contemporary, and therefore they go to nightclubs, have a drink or something, whatever they do, another expenditure. What we think is discretionary is a necessity. At the end of the month, they have no cash. Keep that in the back of your mind. They are living off a borrowed money, hoping that they will do well down the road or depend on some assistance by the family. Education still is supported by the family, and therefore there's a huge issue. That's fine. Contrast that to a crane operator in the port of Mundra in Kutch. He makes about 65,000 a month easily, and there's a scarcity of crane operators. typically high school educated, but he has got vocational technical training certification to operate, probably married, lives with his parents, and therefore there is no rent anymore. Typical middle class family with a few separate bedrooms, but brick and mortar as opposed to a hut. He has no other costs except TDS that he pays. His discretionary income, positive cash flow, is much greater. Probably has a wife and a child. Wife is a homemaker, taking care of parents, in-laws, and of course taking care of the family. So the real buying power in India is no longer in metropolitan markets, but it is all in second tier, third tier, fourth tier cities, all the way to rural population. So the hottest selling motorcycles today are in non-urban areas. Used to be urban at one time. Cell phones are growing very fast in non-urban areas than urban areas. At Wipro, on the consumer care side, the largest market for Santur is no longer the city but all rural India. Actually, it has surpassed any of the Hindustan Unilever products today, such as a Lifebuoy, Lux, etc., because of the concentration in the rural market. Major change. So as a marketer, we have to understand that's the future. I'll take one more key example and tell you why India is becoming so attractive to the outside world. And there are other factors, but this is one additional one which is very key. All of a sudden, we are leapfrogging technology. Since we don't have credit ratings on individuals, we feel like we cannot give credit cards, but we are bypassing credit cards to online payment system like Paytm. During demonetization, Paytm became the de facto platform, growing enormously. So e-commerce has come much sooner than we realized because of the infrastructure. And most of the e-commerce business is actually in second-tier cities, third-tier cities. This will be the place where Amazon and Walmart will have a huge battleground. In the case of Walmart, which I've analyzed, the impact will be different than what we think. Not only will they serve through Flipkart platform, world products that will come here, but my estimates are running that Walmart, once it's fully established here, in about a year or 2 years, unless there is a political objection that comes in or lobbying of some sort, it'll probably generate at least 2.5 lakhs or 250,000 new manufacturers out of India. Biggest growth will be small and medium enterprises, who will make products which will be distributed through Walmart system worldwide. They don't have the capacity to go worldwide. They have to depend on an exporter. Walmart reduces all of the channel members and crunches to one-step distribution or two-step distribution. And we have world-class manufacturers, small family-run businesses, whose products will be sold not only in America, but in Mexico, Canada, and China. As we buy made-in-China products through distributors and other channels, this is a reverse. So I'm watching that. They paid $16 billion to Flipkart, and there is a reason behind. That is the sourcing destination. And there are a bunch of product categories that will be made here, either Walmart private brands. Flipkart already has the private brands, and there's a legislative things going on right now because incumbents here would like to slow down multinationals coming here in some fashion. Amazon is going to massively invest in the warehousing system here. And of course, Uber is here along with Ola in big cities. It is transforming in many ways, just goes on and on. So the digital technology, consumer preferences are the two key factors. The third factor for the growth of India has to do with defense. This is a country that has a huge deferment of defense capabilities. It is catching up now. We are the largest buyers of defense weapons in the world now, surpass Saudi Arabia, for example, which is unthinkable. And we are buying weapons from all over the world for our own security and the defense. And I think that is going to be another major sector that will explode in a big way. It includes homeland security and all that stuff pretty much. And the last area, and the one that's very big, is that we have huge market for education and healthcare, medicine. And those are now becoming very significant attractions for foreign investment, not just only domestic investment. I must tell you here as an outsider looking in, and I'll go into a formal presentation in a moment, one of the key outside world has seen change is that our best brand ambassador turns out to be Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In fact, there may not be any other leader in the world today who is equally comfortable or makes comfortable people like Putin on the one hand, a Russian leader with a very different background, Angela Merkel, who may be like 360 degrees different person. It's all individual relationships compared to, let's say, Putin. Cameron government when they were in the British, in charge, or more recent government. French twice, 2 changes. America from Obama to Trump, for example. Anywhere in the world, as outsiders, we get the feedback about, and obviously he does his homework, and he goes out and he's able to negotiate or he's able to convince it is worth investing. As you know, the equity market, total equity, private equity, debt equity, and of course the public equity, stock market equity, now has exceeded $60 billion already. The future is more private equity. It will not come through stock market as much or the debt market, but private equity will rule the world for the next 1 decade all over the world primarily. In addition to that, there's an enabling factor, which is our change in the government. Trump administration is desperately wanting a strong alignment with India and US. He's probably the biggest advocate in terms of creating a strong partnership, and he's trying very hard as president of the nation to see if there's an alignment. So winds are all in our favor. There are challenges which I will come to in a moment, and that's the whole area I'll talk about. One of the biggest challenges is that we really have a legacy behind us where we have incidents in the past where we don't trust some of these people. Remember, this is the nation right after independence should have become the manufacturing capital for the Allies, which were the victors in World War II. There was a shortage of labor. They wanted to outsource industries. Like British Empire did in the 1800s, they outsourced steel industry and textile industry, which is why we have textile mills here, which is why we have steel mills in India, and they also outsourced to America. So in the 50s, they were looking at India as a sourcing destination, but somehow we had a colonial history and we knew we couldn't trust the European colonial people, so we did not align with them. There will be no Japan today. There will be no Taiwan, no South Korea, and definitely no China. That's very much like when goddess Lakshmi comes. Do you go and say, let me wash my face, have some dirt here, etc., or you simply say, bless me now? So we missed that opportunity. We missed another opportunity when Mrs. Gandhi had to have a security because of the borders being very in conflict. Bangladesh was being formed, there was a civil war going on, and she needed to make sure that militarily we have a backup support, but we had to align with Soviet Union at that time, which delayed the whole liberalization, etc., by at least about a quarter of a century. This is the 3rd time now. Does not have to be Americans, it has to be primarily anybody international. Indian economy will get integrated, whether we like it or not, as a part of the global economy. That's the main message I will give. So we have to learn how to create a global presence, and it is a very good story. Several of our companies are world leaders now. So Aditya Birla Group, for example, is like number one in carbon black, but through acquisitions. Same Aditya Birla Group has a very large presence in America on the flat aluminum sheet business, maybe in that part of the steel or aluminum business, maybe number one now in the world. Mahindra and Mahindra are doing very well in the tractor business, both in America as well as in China through acquisitions. In IT services, we are one of the leaders in the world. I don't think anybody else can come anywhere near diamond cutting industry. We seem to have almost a monopolistic power in the world in the way we do value add. And that I wanted to go back to my Walmart example because it's very important to understand that the largest selling of diamonds in America is no longer in the jewelry shops or chains like Zales, etc. It is at Walmart. So diamond industry will benefit with Walmart pumping more diamonds from here to the rest of the world, including China. So we have capabilities here, and they are going to be revitalized. Outsiders see more opportunities than we may be able to see. So let me give you a more formal presentation, then we'll open up for Q&A. So here is my first slide. The title I had given before, The Decade of Destination, how the rise of India is inevitable, I've changed it slightly to give a little more contemporary view. So the new title is called India in the New World, and how India will become strategic globally. I must tell you that Trump administration policy is dramatically changing the world in trade and investment. Very important to understand. It's a permanent change, not just a temporary change. And in the process, India will become one of the beneficiaries. So here is the old world order, if you can see the slides. As of 1987, 75% of all the GDP, which is value add on raw materials, was generated by these 15 nations. The common market, Western European 12, Japan is a later entrant, US and Canada. They're all advanced countries. 45% of the world trade was among these 15 nations. Rest of the world did not matter. Value add is greater, almost 75%. Trade is less because most of the raw materials still came from former colonies. Agricultural raw materials, industrial raw materials, they all came to advanced countries to do value add. All of them are now aging and aging rapidly. Japan now is at a stage where there is no point of no return. There is declining population every month. There are fewer men than the last month, and there's nothing they can do because they did not encourage immigration to come in, and the population has aged. So they're struggling, and therefore they have to grow outside of their own economy. We thought it's a unique incidence of Japanese, but that's true of Germans, where the net birth is same as a net death, zero population growth. Lowest fertility in the world actually is in Spain, which is a Catholic country, 1.4 children per woman. Immediately followed by Italy, another major Catholic country, 1.5. This is unthinkable, because Catholics actually encourage procreation. So this is the new world that we are living in. America still is positive in terms of 1.6 children per woman. So we still have some net growth, but our forecast is that in 2030, we'll also have a zero population count unless our immigration policy changes, where immigrants are the ones who put their roots, create families, produce children, etc., etc. 65% of all new births in America are by Hispanic families. Think about that change. The growth has been primarily non-Northern European white population. They are not producing as many children, especially in the northern part of America. Massive change there also, right? And that's very key factor because ultimately the aging creates both an opportunity and a problem. We have more retirees than anybody else today. Every day we are retiring 10,000 Americans, which is the age 65. Fastest growing segment in America is people who live to be 100 years or older, centenarians, followed by those who live 85 years or older. So while we talk about the younger baby boomers and millenniums and Z segment or whatever we call them, our biggest issue is that companies are struggling because you take General Motors, who created a pension plan on the belief that there will be 9 new factory workers for 1 retiree to pay for the pension. Today it's the reverse. There are 9 or 8 retirees for 1 new employee they hire. It's non-sustainable. And these are contracts they sign with unions, which means they're legally binding. So the only way out is to declare Chapter 11 protection. Because now you lose your equity, but the judge basically decides the old contracts, how much will be renegotiated. Airlines declared bankruptcies for the same reason in America, for our information, to get away from past obligations. So GM had to sell Hughes Corporation, EDS, a major IT services company, GMAC, which is a finance arm, very profitable, a significant dilution just to survive. Then you see this 2008 economic recession, which pushed it over even more, right? GM's future lies more with China than any other nation in the world. It's not the American market that will survive GM, but the Chinese market where they're doing quite well. Fascinating again, right? And this is true of quite a few legacy industrial age companies like General Electric. Who would have imagined only 20 years ago that GE will be on its final end in many ways? It'll be struggling to survive. The newer things in our stock market like S&P 500 or even Dow Jones 30 are all technology companies. You see among the top 5 or 6, they're all basically Google, Apple, Microsoft, and similar companies. It's totally changing the world. So that's the key. This is now changing to a world was stable, by the way, at that time. This is a consequence of the World War II. There was a balance of power between communism and capitalism. Cold War was a common front, so small civil wars in nations were all aggregated into massive one front. There was a harmonious economic, military, and political alignment between Japan because they have defeated the Japanese, so they had to go along. Germans who were defeated, and therefore Western Europe and America. They created new world bodies called IMF, World Bank, and United Nations. That created some sort of a harmony to look upon the future of the world in the same way. What has changed? The world order. A major counterbalancing force to capitalism or allies is now collapse of communism. So countries like Yugoslavia break apart. You have the Eastern European countries, independent. They go through their own policy and political changes like Poland, what it has gone through, or Ukraine. Think about all those. Now we have smartphones and social media, which says I can trigger a revolution almost instantly. If I wanted to create a disruption in any country, I can do it through social media mechanisms, as we have issues about that one where in our elections now, foreign powers are trying to influence the election according to the public press at least, right? Every country is very nervous now. That you can topple the governments as an outsider. It only happens in certain cases where a foreign nation will intervene for whatever reason, whether it's in the Gulf countries, Middle East, for example, or Latin America. But today it is very different. We talked about the aging of the advanced nations. Next one is a new trade regime called WTO. which is under threat now. It tried to create a change, trade as a growth engine after 80s, but even that is stalling now. Terrorism has gone global. It will be strictly Taliban in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden was the only one who, along with Arafat before, as the one who questioned the Western capitalism, Western faith-based, Christian faith-based approach to Middle East. They wanted them to be out. Today, Taliban is a global enterprise. Domestic terrorism is on the rise among all of the advanced countries. The lead nation to experience that turns out to be France, followed by United Kingdom, and now America. So homegrown terrorism is a new buzzword in the process that creates a huge uncertainty in a nation. And now we have new leaders who think differently. All three new leaders are quite non-traditional. You have Prime Minister Modi, who has a very interesting thinking about the nation as the primary reason and everybody else for subordinate, very different political approach. Xi Jinping, the same way in China. And also true now in America with President Donald Trump. So in this one, we have a new triad power that's emerging out of nowhere. And that is India, China, America. I have an institute policy think tank called India, China, America. We wanted to call it China, India, America. That sounds logical, obviously. But its acronym is a CIA institute, which is a brand name you don't want to acquire, even if they want to give it away to you, right? We did not want America in the front, and hence we relabeled as India, China, America Institute. And this is absolutely agreed upon by most political leaders in the world, that this new triad power will shape geopolitics of the world. And I'll talk about in the process in a moment. I have about 10, 15 minutes still, right? That time, okay. So consumer markets, as we talked about, defense, as we talked about, and security will drive the future relationships among these markets. Each one of these markets is the largest consumer market. We are becoming number 2 consumer market across product categories, not just cell phones or mobile phone services, but for refrigerators, two-wheelers, any product line, durable goods, garments. We are like number 2, often becoming number 1, surpassing the Chinese. So everybody has to show up here. This is a big market now. And so that's the key race is going to be that side. Defense is the other one primarily, and the homeland security is the third one. So here are the things. The New World Order or a disorder. China emerges as an economic superpower. There is no denial anymore. Even the hardcore people who are anti-Chinese now admit publicly, not just privately, that nothing can stop China, except one thing, which is what we do in my institute. We don't see major war in Europe anymore because of the European Union. It was called which is called United States of Europe, which was the Churchill's view about the future, that you should have an economic integration, political integration, and of course security and military integration. So Europe cannot afford to go to war with each other anymore, unlike World War I or World War II. We don't see any major war of the World War level in Latin America. Gulf countries, primarily the Middle East as we call them, there may be sparks like Syria, for example. There may be another spark, but it is not likely to explode into a global war. Only place where we see potential threat of a major war arising is in Asia. And that is the one way to slow down a nation. Wars are often created by outsiders, not by insiders. It is very similar to quite often California dry land. It is the tourist who comes to the national park, does the camping but does not know how to put out the fire properly, that leads into, once you start a spark like that, it is uncontrollable. So the biggest worry is that in Asia, if you put all Asia, there are about 5-6 sparks that can explode any day. And that creates slowdown of the Asian century, as it is called. If you put China, if you put Japan, if you put South Korea, if you put India and the ASEAN countries, it is the largest economic power shifting from European Union, largest trading within those nations. Everything can come to a standstill if there is a war. So that's the only worry. Other than that, we all agree that China will emerge as an economic superpower, if not a military superpower, but definitely economic superpower. There's a discord among traditional allies. Have you seen that thing that today continental Europeans are not on the same page as the British guys, which are not on the same page as the Americans? They're now fighting among themselves. So they are at a paralysis. They don't know how to move forward. If you go to G7 meetings nowadays, there is no agreement what to talk. Paris Accord, we moved out. One more nation is pulling out now. What was a consensus building process through policy and politics is now breaking apart. Populism everywhere. Very important event. It's not limited to what happened in America or in France, where the young person comes in out of nowhere, or in England, for example, with the Brexit vote, but every nation is suffering from populism, which is a very important element coming in. There is an Asia-centric economic and military pivot. The world is now looking at Asia as the future, which means there will be more fights by outsiders in these territories, both in the military side as well as in the market and economic competition side. Rise of the new middle class in emerging markets. This is phenomenal. Today, nobody wants to buy unbranded products in countries like India. 65% of all consumption in India, even today, is unbranded products. In services, 90% roughly. 5-6 years ago, luggage, the largest number of luggage built was unbranded luggage, not VIP, Aristocrat, Safari, and those brands that we know, or Samsonite, etc. Today it's all shifting. I was surprised at Wipro. We were told that more than 50% of all the laptops were made strictly white label, as it is called. Somebody got the Microsoft software or Linux platform, which is an open architecture, got the chips, put it together, no label. Today it is being phased out with Lenovo here, for example, Dell computers, HP, branded consumption. Atta, everybody wants to buy branded atta, branded lentils, branded rice, etc. Big change. And with e-commerce, as well as, in fact, big bazaar type, organized retailing coming in. So the whole middle class is rising enormously. Political and social acrimony globally. With social media, every leader is on a Twitter now, either to defend somebody's comment or to make a comment. And obviously, people are watching what you say. I find that there is no some such thing as my private life and a public life. If you are a leader of an organization, whether it's an academic institution or a corporation or a government or a religion, your private life is public, period. You cannot hide anymore. So often I say, and I mean it, if I want to know what I did yesterday, I do a Google search on me. Things are recorded about me that I was unaware altogether. The biggest change in the technology is not applications or apps, as we call it, but the memory. I can store a whole library in a flash drive today. So I can store memory forever. So any indiscretion I may have done 20 years ago, people can disclose or identify, which is interesting. So I don't need a press to be the vigilante. Every person now becomes a vigilante, which means there is no way out except to not engage in that behavior in the first place. It's not just the Me Too movement, but there are many other issues. So you can't live in a gated community, nice neighborhood and say, my corporate life will be one way and my private life will be totally different. Today, it's all blurring the boundaries, which is creating a havoc with all the leadership positions in the world now. That's very fascinating. And the capital markets are in turmoil right now because we don't know where the world will go. It seems like every new announcement made by our executive branch changes the stock market. Anything Federal Express announces, like last 2 weeks ago, interest rates will be raised, stock market 4-5% drops in one day. Now they are saying interest rates will not be increased as much. We are happy, stock market goes up. The beta or the volatility in the stock market will be more important than the average appreciation or depreciation. So this is the new world order. So why India is destined to become strategic globally? Both China and India and the US, both China and US consider India to be very strategic for their future. Chinese would love to have India align on their side, and America is desperate to align on our side, India's side. India has all the ingredients but no recipe. Very fascinating. We have all of the raw materials to be a good global economic power, but we don't seem to have a recipe. What's the recipe? A recipe is the vision about the future. Some nations plan out their vision where they want to go. Singapore government, where I have worked, I've seen that very consistently. Every 20 years they have a vision about where this Singapore as a nation should be compared to where it is. So you got to have a vision. Vision is all about positioning for the future. That's all vision is all about. How do I position the enterprise, the institution for the future, whether it's a religion like Catholicism, for example, or Roman Catholic Church, or whether in fact it is a government, or whether in fact it is an enterprise. It makes no difference. Vision is always aspirational. People don't like negative news about the future. They would like always positive. It's always aspirational. It is always proactive that says, if you allow the market processes free things, it will not happen. You have to intervene. That's what leadership all about, proactive intervention. And it is mission-driven. There are milestones and goals. Like the famous saying, man on moon. Remember, President Kennedy basically said, we will have a man on moon, now get it done. So you have a mission-driven capability. Vision have those elements, and that is what India needs. What are India's enviable ingredients, the raw materials, for which I can have a recipe? Big consumer market, we already talked about that one. Second one is very key, and I would put it number one. I must tell you, since 1991 reforms, for the first time you have seen in the average Indian person, I can do it. It's a positive image about self. Before that one was a defeatist. There are no opportunities. There is nothing I can do. I'm at the mercy of everybody else. That self-positive image matters. It's a can-do attitude now, and that's very phenomenal. And it's very true among the ordinary people out in the rural population even, to the very strong entrepreneurial culture, etc., which is another major key ingredient. That this nation is entrepreneurial. And the real competitive advantage of a nation is entrepreneurship, not land, labor, or whatever else we talk about. And certain communities are more entrepreneurial than others. Of course, Gujarat excels in this case. And now with the internet, etc., the opportunities for entrepreneurship are enormous, and this country will produce more entrepreneurs than imagined. It seems like it's our DNA. We have a huge digital talent in absolute numbers, people who are trained into software especially, and sometimes part of the component making in the hardware. Another key asset which I've been advocating this government to really strongly leverage, which we didn't do a good job, but it's happening since the 2014 election especially. There's a huge Indian global diaspora which is very influenced all over the world. If you go to Canada, top ministers are of Indian origin. The defense minister is, I think, of Indian origin. America, the same thing, in all key positions. Think about several large American corporations whose CEOs are of Indian origin. This was again unthinkable 15, 20 years ago that Microsoft head will be of Indian origin, Google head will be of Indian origin, just goes on and on. MasterCard, I can give you all kinds of industries, which is interesting. And Indians have integrated themselves with the places where they have gone, especially in advanced countries, into the legal system, the financial system, and now getting elected into the parliament or the Congress. We have quite a few Indians now aspiring, born and brought up there, to get into the political process. So large number of incumbent or contingency has been just elected in the sort of the midterm elections, as we call it, right? Very powerful diaspora. In educational institutions, if you take in the management discipline, top universities, the deans are of Indian origin now. That was unthinkable only a decade ago. So started with Deepak Jain at Northwestern, but Harvard dean is of Indian origin, Cornell dean was of Indian origin, all the top 7, 8 institutions in management, highly ranked, are of Indian origin. Leverage that. That's a raw material ingredient. As a good chef, you can add that ingredient. Deep diplomatic reach. This is something, a hidden asset. India as a non-aligned country has an enormous amount of deep diplomats everywhere. Now you make them into economic brand ambassadors rather than strictly bureaucrats. That is the latest change in the External Affairs Ministry. Happened in the previous Foreign Secretary Jaishankar under this new government. So that's like diaspora, it is very important. There are many conflicts where India actually can act as the channel to negotiations or the back channel negotiations, because conflicts where nations, advanced countries cannot relate to them, whether it's a Burma, North Korea, Iran, for example, Syria, I can go on give you names, where India can be a good intermediary. Is this can be done? Of course, the answer is yes, because when Nasser broke the relationship between Cairo, Egypt, and Washington, America, they used the Indian embassy in Washington to do the negotiations. So when you don't have diplomatic relationship, you do have some other way still to continue communicating unless you're going to war. Very key asset, ingredient that can be leveraged. India is very well known and growing soft power. Not just culture, but technology. Pharmaceuticals, we are very good. Space program is a world's envy with shoestring operations. We have achieved more first-time breakthroughs in our space program than most nations could accomplish. Very interesting. So growing soft power. Including eventually the companies' brands have to become, to me, companies' brands of made in India or Indian origin have to become world-class brands. This is how Japan, from a country of cheap goods, low quality, became world-class. People admire Japan because they produce great products. True of South Korea. Today it's China. Made in China is no longer a laughing stock, because China can produce products of any quality, most luxury, highly priced, highly precision products, not just consumer but industrial products, machinery, power generations, no matter what you look at. China can produce all quality. It's not just a low quality. And Chinese corporations like the Haier, the Lenovo, the Huawei of the world, Xiaomi, which is coming big way in India, actually will dominate the world, because they are doing it by policy. Can we do it by our vision or whatever we can do? We have a very deep Russian connection. Russia is a very strategic nation, beyond just Putin. And if there is one nation that knows Russia in and out better than any other, is India. 50 years ago, whatever relationship we established through non-alignment policy, Mrs. Gandhi's involvement, we have a deep relationship. Hence you see a lot of Russian defense things are coming to India back again, beyond the mixed fighter planes, for example. And surprisingly, India has a strong military. Both the army side, tactical as it is called, or the strategic weapons. which is fascinating. I never knew that Indian military was so strong, okay? We don't brag about it, but in the dogfight between American fighters on, let's say, F-16 and the Indian fighters, Indian pilots, military pilots outsmarted the Americans, which is unthinkable. Happened in the Navy battlegrounds. Right now you have a Navy war things going on. Again, rest of the world is finding Australian Navy captains are saying, my God, these Indians are smart. Partly the expectations are low because they think they can't do it, so you get surprised anyhow. But it's true. We says whatever we are doing, however primitively we are doing it, it seems to be creating a talent. And the numbers are staggering for us, like China the same way. So given all that thing, the answer is very simple. We have to do, through vision, repositioning of the nation from the domestically isolated or isolated domestic economy, which was the license Raj planned economy. How do we become integrated into global economy? And from a regional diplomacy, the SAARC architecture, maybe Southeast Asia, how to become key important partner in all global discussions, which means mostly advanced countries basically say India has to be at the table, not on the side of the table, which is a key change, which is happening. I must tell you, it is fascinating how Indian people of Indian origin, retired diplomats, are brought into main discussion. So here is the one, soft power through, how can you become soft power through development of globally admired brands. Biggest weakness India has is that we are not in the same leagues as the German-made cars, German machinery, Swiss machinery, or Japanese products, or Korean products. We have all gone through the cycle. One of the biggest soft powers is the brand names of products that are made by Indian corporations. And that's very doable. Embrace global standards, which is the main thing. Quality standards have to be global, not domestic. And global benchmarks for domestic products and services. Even products made for the Indian market should be of global standards. Let's say pharmaceuticals, generic drugs, for example. Become global hub for professional talent. This is already going to happen. Make in India will be Make in India for professional services. So the average wage in the call center would be, the price that you command would be $8, $10 per hour. BPO a little more. My view is that the future is about $65 to $70 wage annual, which is the price you charge, and that's where the market is. High-end talent is plenty in India, in the R&D field, etc., etc. Become a second global sourcing destination. People want to de-risk from China, great opportunity, grab that opportunity. Speed up digital India, because this creates speed in everything else we do. Quality goes up, speed goes up, scale comes up. India has the size but no scale. We have fragmented, ownership fragmented. India has too many banks. So I'm strongly encouraging government should consolidate the banks. Don't allow market process, which is slow. And most of them are national banks. You don't need so many banks. If you consolidate, now you become very large globally. As oil industry, they have consolidated, for example, etc., etc. This is the fastest growing market for flying. Have you seen that change from railways and etc. to flying? Very large. That again is one where you have to have a scale. Encourage foreign direct investment in India for global markets, which means you make it here not just for the Indian market, but for the regional hub market primarily. And this is already happening in the automobile components. We can see that thing. Pharmaceuticals. I think Korean companies are investing here for not only making products for the Indian demand, but the neighboring demand kind of a notion, which is interestingly. So here are some examples. Provide economic and social incentives to business enterprises, both for private and state-owned, for global presence. Which means if you go global as an enterprise, there are some benefits the government will give you to encourage more global presence by and large. Next one is digitize, digitize, digitize. I have recommended this many years ago, that the only way to slow down corruption is computerization. You are not allowed to do things. And government is the biggest market, sometimes biggest vendor in terms of benefits. So offer everything online, there is a recording, etc., and it's happening now. We had, I think your Union Minister for External Affairs, number 2, State, Minister of State, who came and they have redistributed passport now. There are centers, Atlanta is one of the centers. I can get a passport now after you apply online, if everything is okay, within like 1 week or less, because it used to be centralized. With technology, I can decentralize. Very fascinating. Invest in management education, not for enterprises, but among the military, because in their training, they never give management principles. Among diplomats, they don't understand. Now they're doing it, by the way. Ahmedabad, I was told, hosted a group of diplomats, next generation, to teach them principles of management, right? Which is fascinating, leadership principles, etc. And state enterprises, because they're all IAS officers who don't get the training in management. They learn on the job how to manage, but we can modernize, contemporize. And I know I'm running for time. Deepen diplomatic relationship with G7 nations, the top 7 markets, not with others. And both personally and professionally. And this is where the Prime Minister seems to shine. They all like him. He does his homework. He seems to relate to different cultures and customs and still remain what I would call Indian identity. If I'm a vegetarian, I can remain vegetarian. I don't have to wear a suit as I'm doing it. I can be in my native dress and still make them comfortable. That's a very unique skill set across cultures and countries. And I think, to me, that's a great asset. Deepening diplomatic relationship with G7 nations, the top 7, 10 nations by and large. Offer Indian retired diplomats for track 2. We already talked about back channel negotiations. They already have a lot of experience. Replace seniority. This will be the hardest one they will ever do, but I'm saying there's no way out. Replace seniority with merit-based bureaucracy. If there is one thing government probably can't do, would be this, okay? We says it's a challenge. Who said seniority system is the right system? At one time that was appropriate, but today with technology, already there is a selective way of doing it right now in some of the bureaucracies in this country, but this is a very key one. So you have early retirements. Why should you wait till age 60, for example? Performance appraisals, which they are doing it, just goes on. Engage with Russia and China with a fresh new perspective. And I'll take one thing. Most Chinese, when I meet them, from the taxi drivers to the biggest advisors in the country, always like me once I say I'm from India. Isn't that interesting? They open up, they talk. So trust by the Chinese and admiration for India is massive. I travel in India from the taxi driver to the highest security advisor to the government. There's a complete mistrust of China. I've never seen any two nations such asymmetry of trust. Because we look at China from the past lens, not the future lens. We look at, similarly, Russia from the past lens, not the future lens. So my view is that I think this will be a key factor. So there's a new geopolitical order. The traditional leaders and institutions are struggling to maintain world order. This has generated opportunity for new leadership. For example, who is struggling? Mrs. Merkel is struggling to create a European Union order. Fortunately, she is surviving, but it's a tough job. This has generated opportunity for new leadership. India is destined to become strategic globally, if not a superpower. And India has all the ingredients, and it is in search of a recipe. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Sheth, for inspiring talk on the current scenario of India. I think the optimism has been now converted to confidence. And we are looking at a great future. Thank you for this. I request Mr. Yatindra Bhai to hand over a memento to Dr. Sheth on behalf of AMA and all of us here.
Thank you.
I thank all of you to be here and having this wonderful time with us. Thanks a lot.